Good morning, everyone. This is Zarina from Taylor's Law School, and I am here today with my fellow colleagues who are also from Taylor's Law School, Shakira, Frida, and Zoe. I am the moderator for today's talk on death penalty in Malaysia. Let's talk about what is death penalty. The definition of death penalty, which is also known as capital punishment, is a sentence of death imposed on a convicted criminal. The history of death penalty is it was first established in the 18th century. Death penalties were carried out by either crucifixion, drowning, beating to death, burning alive, or impalement. The mandatory death penalty has been retained in states such as China, India, the United States, and most Islamic states. However, it has been abolished in the United Kingdom, where I will quote the statement in the Murder, Abolition of Death Penalty Act 1963. No person shall suffer death for murder, and a person convicted of murder shall subject to be sentenced to imprisonment for life. Based on the latest news, a debate sparked whether Malaysia should abolish or enforce the mandatory death penalty after the news of two terror attacks that has happened at mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand on the 15th of March 2019. If Malaysia were to enforce mandatory death penalty, what is the reason behind it? The reasons for enforcing mandatory death penalty will be further elaborated by Frida.
So, based on Malayan law journal article about death penalty in Malaysia to abolish or not to abolish by Ruben Anatan Santana Dash, mentioned that Sid Hambaran in 2005 states that the main principle for having mandatory death sentence is to retribution, deterrence, rehabilitation, and prevention. So firstly, retribution is to obtain justice for the victim for criminal offences by punishing those commit criminal offences such as murder, raping in result of death, kidnapping in order to murder, committing terrorist act, and drug trafficking. It is to prevent a person from going back to the society after they commit these crimes, as this type of people they cannot transform, and it should put them to death in order to maintain the peacefulness of the society. Based on statistics of Amnesty International, it is found that most cases where death sentence is imposed in Malaysia are for drug trafficking. As of 2017, 71% of the prisoners in Malaysia are on death row because of drug trafficking. Under Section 39B of Dangerous Drugs Act 1952, anyone who found guilty of drug trafficking shall be punishable with death or imprisoned for life. Its strictness can be seen by the judgment made by Raja Azlan Shah, a former Chief Justice of Malaysia in the appeal case. So the case is about Chanel Shah against public prosecutor in 1982. The Azlan Shah said that other than in the most exceptional circumstance, a sentence of death should be followed a conviction for trafficking in order to mark the gravity of the offense, to emphasize public disapproval, to serve as warning to the others, to punish the offenders, and to protect the society. The second reason for having death penalty sentence is deterrence. So based on Malayan law journal article, it mentioned that the deterrence is divided into two types, that is specific deterrence and general deterrence. For specific deterrence, it is to prevent the person who has committed the crimes from repeating their offences by giving harsh punishment of them so that they will fear of being punished and caught again. So general deterrence is applies to potential killers, those who are looking at the punishment meted out at those who are committing the crimes. So it will discouraging them from commit the crime because of fear of being punished. Supported by studies that show that death penalty can reduce the crime. Malaysia, for whoever commit murders, the only punishment for them is death penalty under Section 302 of Penal Code. The case is about Ramesh and Satu Batumalai. Brothers were sentenced to death in 2010. They were found guilty for killing Christian Raman in 2006. Carl Smith and Vitali in 2008 have mentioned that it's fair to punish those who commit crimes such as murder, rape and drugs based on life for a life principle. It means that a person who took a life must be paid back by giving up his life.
Those are the reasons on why Malaysia should enforce mandatory death penalty that has been elaborated by Frida. Moving on to the next point, there are advantages for enforcing death penalty, but there are also disadvantages for enforcing mandatory death penalty. The points on the advantages will be elaborated by Shakira, and the disadvantages will be elaborated by Zoe.
So the advantages, which also means the reasons why we're having the death penalty, because why else would we have the death penalty if not for the benefits of it? So my first point would be a little bit sentimental, because advantages of having death penalty is to provide justice to the victim's family. So the main concern of the law is to provide justice to the people of its rulings. This sometimes means charge, granting a plea bargain, and sometimes, for the worst of murderers, justice is death. So if you look at the examples, for example, the Roberto's execution in June 2000, the brother of Roberto's victim, he said, "I can't say that I'm happy to see him die, but justice has been served." So the same goes to another case of Joseph Falter's execution in June 1999. The victim's son said almost the same thing, which means he wants justice for his family members lost. They can put the offender to death publicly and charge admission for this event, or they can just put the person, the criminal, in prison and do hard labor for the rest of their miserable lives. But isn't it such a disgrace, or isn't it, or does it make sense that these criminals are now enjoying a lot of facilities in the prisons? For example, in Malaysia itself, they enjoy 5 times eating a day, which can say other people who are not in prison cannot enjoy this. And all that while they actually owe a debt to the victims, and to add insult to their injury, they have to pay taxes, which is a compulsory in every country, to maintain these miscreants in enjoying their luxurious life, relatively luxurious life.
While the death penalty, or the capital punishment, as some may refer to it, may come with some benefits, as Shakira pointed out, but it also comes with many, many disadvantages that cannot be ignored. These disadvantages range from lack of legal representation that led to this sentencing, or inherent and inbuilt injustices in our justice system that led to these sentencing, such as racial discrimination, gender bias discrimination, and so forth. But one of the three main points that I want to focus on as the main three disadvantages of having a death penalty is that it creates a cycle of revenge. Death penalty puts into our minds, it creates this ideology that if you do a wrong onto me, then I need to do the same onto you. It feeds into the ideology of a hand for a hand, and this is toxic for our society. It creates this, as pointed out in an article called "The Romance of Revenge" by the University of Michigan. It creates this cycle of revenge in our society, and it may lead to the undermining of our justice system. Because what is our justice system if not a moral high ground for our society, a moral high ground that puts us into order? And if we introduce the idea and the notion of revenge, this constant need for getting revenge, then we're completely undermining the structure of our justice system. And that is one big disadvantage of having the death penalty.
So let's move on to my second point, which I think everyone would agree on this. It is undeniable that death penalty prevents the offender from committing any further crimes in a permanent way, because they're dead. And by giving a death penalty to offenders who committed severe crimes such as murder during kidnapping, genocide, and of course, they were discussing murder during a drug-related drive-by shooting, they are prevented from committing further crimes and offences, and the public are thereby protected, which brings me to the point, which is to protect the public. Death penalty is to protect the public. And according to Paul G. Cassell, capital sentences, when carried out, save innocent lives by permanently incapacitating the murderers. Some person who commit capital homicide, they will slay other innocent person if they are given the opportunity to do so. So the death penalty is the most effective way of preventing such killers from repeating their crimes.
Well, based on your argument, I will bring your attention to the disadvantage of death penalty, which is actually wrongfully convicting people and passing the death sentence onto them. Based on a study done by Cornell Law on global wrongful convictions, it was found that around 4.1% of inmates on death row were wrongfully convicted, either for crimes which they did not commit or for crimes that were blown out of proportion. Therefore, it's not exactly a good measure. The death penalty is not exactly a good measure of public safety.
So let's go to my third point, which I think is the most important point of all, is that it is also the reason that Freda had said it is a deterrence. Death penalty is seen as a deterrence to the public. See, deterrence is concerned with preventing the commission of further crimes. And the idea is that when people see this heavy punishment being executed, they will feel scared. They would fear to commit any more crimes. So punishments may aim at individual deterrence. Punishment may aim at individual deterrence, which means dissuading the person in question of committing the crime, or general deterrence, which is our main concern right now, which means showing other people what it is like, what is likely to happen to them if they commit a crime. So according to a study by Hashim Desbash and Joanna M. Shepard, in their article, So according to a study by Hashim Desbash and Joanna M. Shepard, there's a 7% crime rate increase on the years when this law was abolished in the US. Furthermore, in the same article, in 1973, Isaac Ehrlich, he employed a new way of researching this thing, and the result was that for every inmate who was executed, seven other lives were saved, because the potential criminals are deterred from committing further crimes. And that concludes that many worry, according to the media of Malaysia itself, many worry that by abolishing the capital punishment, it will embolden the hardcore criminal to continue committing crimes.
Well, your point brings me to my next and final point, which is that the death penalty, capital punishment, is not essentially a good crime deterrent. In 2014, in the United States, a country which still imposes the death penalty, there were 35 sentences passed of capital punishment, but there were 14,000 crimes, severe crimes and murders. Therefore, based on these statistics, it can be concluded that death penalty is not exactly a good deterrent of crime anymore. Now, maybe based on studies that were done decades ago, it may have been a good deterrent, but based on current studies in our modern world, there is no concrete evidence that imposing the death penalty in capital punishment leads to a decrease in potential crimes. And based on human psychology, someone who is willing to go so far as to committing horrendous crimes does not think of the consequences, because they do not believe that they will be caught. They think of themselves above the law, above the justice systems, and they never predict that they will be caught, and they do not think of the sentencing that will occur after they're caught. And that concludes my point, and that is that the death penalty, though can be seen as advantageous in some cases, in some areas, it comes with many disadvantages, many of which are that the death penalty is plain inhumane and completely undermines our justice system and the humanity and moral high ground that we value so much in our justice system.
So that concludes the advantages and disadvantages of death penalty that has been elaborated by Shakira and Zoe. So now we are going to look further into the Commonwealth countries' take on mandatory death penalty.
Thank you, Zarina. Now, as you can see behind me is a world map. The colored states are known as the Commonwealth countries, and they're divided into two categories: abolitionists and retentionists, marked in blue and red respectively. Like Malaysia, a retentionist country, another country that still practices the death penalty is India. A man by the name of Yaqub Abdul Razak Memon was convicted for conspiring in a terrorist attack known as Mumbai Blast 1993, which killed 257 civilians. He pleaded numerously, and the public themselves signed petitions to free him. However, the Supreme Court dismissed his appeals, as it is stated under the Penal Code of Section 120B, subsection 1, whereby any parties who commit offence that are punishable with death are punished in the same manner as the abetment of the offence. This led to his execution on the 30th of July 2015. Moreover, on the 21st of April 2018, India passed a bill known as the Criminal Law Amendment Act 2018 after there was a public outrage on the case of an 8-year-old girl named Asifa Banu who was gang raped and killed by men. Under Section 376B, it is stated that rape and gang rape of girls below the age of 12 years will carry a minimum of 20 years imprisonment and is extendable to life in prison or death. In contrary, there are many Commonwealth countries who have made the decision to abolish the death penalty. A recent example is South Africa. The Constitutional Court of South Africa has made the decision to abolish the death penalty on the 6th of June 1995, following the case of the state against Makwanyane and Machunu. The two accused were convicted with 4 counts of murder, 1 count of attempted murder, and 1 count of robbery with aggravating circumstances. The counsels who represented the accused submitted that it conflicted with Section 9 and Section 11, subsection 2 of Chapter 3 of the Constitution, whereby it is stated that every person has a right to life and that no person shall be subject to torture, whether it be physical, mental, or emotional, nor shall any person be subject to cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. The court considered this, and the act of executing someone in South Africa was considered unconstitutional. Now moving back to the panel.
To summarize the points that has been elaborated and hearing of the Commonwealth countries' take on mandatory death penalty, it is relevant that mandatory death penalty is necessary. That thus my fellow colleagues and I believe that Malaysia needs to enforce mandatory death penalty instead of abolishing it. We have reached the end of our talk, so I hope this has helped you understand death penalty better. I would like to thank all of you for your undivided attention. Thank you.